You believe you make your choices, your opinions, your desires, your dreams, your fears. But what if that belief is your first illusion? Imagine walking into a room filled with mirrors. Every reflection looks like you, different versions, different emotions, different choices, but all of them staring back with the same silent accusation. Are you sure you are the one in control? The truth is uncomfortable. Most people live inside a mental maze they never built. A maze shaped by childhood experiences, society's expectations, subtle punishments, hidden rewards, social pressure, emotional manipulation, fear, validation cravings, and the people who understand your mind better than you do. Not because they're smarter, but because they've studied your blind spots. The shortcuts your brain takes to save energy, the habits it forms without telling you, the fears you try to hide, even from yourself. This book does not aim to scare you. It aims to wake you up. You will discover how your mind is influenced without your permission, how everyday interactions shape your beliefs, how toxic people can rewrite your reality, how media plants emotions you think are yours, and how your past quietly scripts your future. But most importantly, you will learn how to reclaim your mental freedom. This is not a dark psychology manual. This is a survival guide, a guide to understanding the forces around you, the forces inside you, and the forces you never noticed. Every chapter reveals another layer of the invisible battlefield inside the human mind. You will walk through stories, psychological experiments, real-life examples, and cinematic scenes that expose the truth about how easily a thought can be shaped, stretched, bent, or stolen. And by the end of this journey, you will not only see the manipulation, you will feel when it's happening. You will sense the traps before stepping into them. You will hear the silent lies behind friendly smiles. You will recognize the patterns designed to break your confidence, control your choices, and limit your potential. The question is simple. What if your mind isn't as free as you think? Are you willing to find out? Now, take a deep breath, turn the page, and step into the world behind your thoughts. Chapter 1. The Mind's Blind Spots. The man in the airport was certain he was about to die, not from a heart attack or a terrorist bullet, but from the simple, brutal fact of the door. He pressed his palms against the sleek, stainless steel restroom exit, heaving with a panic that tasted like copper. His heartbeat was a frantic drum against his ribs. People brushed past him, washing their hands, avoiding his wide, pleading eyes. To them, he was just another unhinged traveler. But he knew. He had pushed. He had pulled. The door would not budge. It was locked or broken, a trap sealing him in. A cleaner entered, whistling. He watched her, a ghost of hope rising in his throat. She walked straight to the door and slid it smoothly to the left. It was a sliding door. He had been so conditioned by a lifetime of rectangular doors with handles, so sure of the universal rule of push or pull, that his mind never even considered another axis of movement. The solution was invisible to him, hidden behind a wall of unconscious assumption. He stood there, sweat cooling on his brow, alive but profoundly embarrassed. His terror had been real. His certainty had been absolute. And both were completely, utterly wrong. This is not a story about a foolish man in an airport. This is a story about you, about the invisible doors in your own mind that you push against every single day, convinced they are immovable walls of reality, never thinking to slide them sideways. We like to think of our minds as crystalline pools of logic, reflecting the world with near-perfect clarity. We deliberate, we weigh options, we arrive at conclusions. We tell ourselves, the rational animal. But this is the mind's most profound magic trick, its greatest act of deception. It convinces you of its own objectivity, all while running a backroom operation of shortcuts, rules of thumb, and perceptual cheats. These are cognitive biases, the mind's blind spots. They are not signs of stupidity. They're the fossilized footprints of a brain built for speed, not accuracy, engineered on ancient savannas for survival, not for navigating the fractal complexity of the modern world. Think of your conscious awareness not as a CEO in a bright, quiet office, but as a harried spokesperson on a dimly lit stage. Behind the curtain, in the buzzing, shadowy theater of your unconscious, a million stagehands are making decisions. They're filtering the flood of sensory data, highlighting the shadow that might be a predator, muting the rustle that's probably just the wind. They're stitching together a coherent narrative from fragments, filling in gaps with best guesses, and presenting it to you, the spokesperson, as a finished, indisputable report. You deliver the news with confidence, never knowing what was edited, what was emphasized, what was thrown away. This psychological machinery leaves traces, patterns of predictable error. Take confirmation bias, the intellectual comfort food of the mind. Once a belief takes root, this job is toxic, my neighbor is rude, this political party is corrupt, your mental stagehands become curators of evidence. They showcase every slight, every confirming data point, and quietly archive anything that contradicts. Your belief feels truer and truer, not because the world changed, but because your perception of it has been narrowed to a single, reinforcing channel. Or consider the anchoring effect. Walk into a store, see a sweater priced at $300, then find a similar one for $150. It feels like a steal. Your initial, arbitrary anchor, $300, set the entire scale of value, making $150 seem reasonable, even if the sweater's true worth is $50. Our first piece of information becomes a gravitational force, pulling all subsequent judgments into its orbit. These aren't just lab curiosities. They are the silent architects of our lives. Real-life story. Anna, a brilliant software engineer, believed her manager disliked her. During meetings, she'd anchor on a slight frown, which was just his thinking face. Her confirmation bias would then catalog every curt email. Every time he walked past her desk without speaking, she'd ignore the praise, the bonus, the difficult project he entrusted to her. Her mind built a prison of certainty. He is against me. It affected her work, her morale, her health. Finally, during a tense review, she blurted out her fear. He was stunned. I rely on you more than anyone, he said. I'm just awkward and overworked. The door she'd been pushing against for 2 years wasn't a wall. It slid open with a single, honest question. The surprising truth is this. These biases aren't bugs in the system. They are its core features. Your brain is a masterpiece of energy conservation. To analyze every single stimulus, every possible outcome, with perfect Descartes-like logic would require more calories and time than you have. So, it uses these shortcuts, heuristics, to generate a good enough answer fast. The problem is, good enough for avoiding a lion on the grassland is catastrophically flawed for choosing a mortgage, interpreting a spouse's silence, or deciding the truth about a complex social issue. Now, let's turn the lens. Let's be direct. You are reading these words right now, and a part of you is nodding, thinking of other people, the partisan politician, the stubborn parent, the misled friend. It is almost impossible to feel the grip of your own blind spots in real time. That is their power. So let's try. Think of a core belief you hold, one that feels as solid as bone. Maybe it's about your own capability. I'm not a creative person. Or about a relationship. We just communicate poorly. Or about the world. Real change is impossible. Feel the solidity of that belief. That solidity is the first warning sign. That is the feeling of the stagehands behind your curtain having long ago stopped collecting new evidence. They are now in the maintenance phase, polishing the existing set pieces. Your belief feels like reality because you're only perceiving the reality your mind has been built to confirm. Here is the mini-climax, the unsettling twist. You are not the pilot of your mind. You are often its passenger, being taken on a tour of a reality that has been carefully pre-edited for your consumption. Your sense of free will, of conscious choice, is frequently a post hoc story you tell yourself to explain decisions that were made milliseconds before by processes you'll never see. You marry the person, take the job, buy the car, and then your conscious mind, the spokesperson, steps in front of the microphone and delivers a beautifully reasoned speech about why it was the obvious, rational choice. The speech is convincing. It feels true, but is often fiction. This is not a call to despair. It is a call to awakening, to a new kind of humility. To know that your mind has blind spots is to gain the first, fragile tool to peek around them. It is to become a gentle skeptic of your own certainties. When you feel that surge of righteous anger, that warm glow of being obviously right, that is the moment to pause, to ask softly, what might I be missing here? What door am I trying to push that might actually slide? The philosophical reflection is this: true mental freedom may not be the absence of bias, an impossible feat for a human brain. True freedom may be the courage to admit you are not fully free, to live with the unsettling knowledge that your brightest convictions are cast in shadows you cannot see. It is to walk through the world less like an infallible judge and more like a curious explorer in a hall of mirrors, aware of the distortions, patiently seeking the true shape of things. The journey begins not with answering questions, but with questioning your answers. The exit is not a door you push. It's a door you finally see. Chapter 2. The Invisible Programming of Childhood. The memory is a Super 8 film, all grain and golden light. You are small. The world is a symphony of giants' knees, of tabletops that loom like cliffs. You are running, perhaps from a looming shadow, a scraped knee, a sudden loud bang. Your chest hitches with sobs that feel like they will crack you open. You run towards the source of all safety, the warm scent of laundry and skin. You raise your arms, a universal signal of surrender to need. And then, the film splinters. The ending is not universal. In one version, arms enfold you. A hum vibrates through the giant's chest into your ear. The world stops shaking. Safety is not a concept. It is a feeling woven into you like a golden thread. When you fall apart, you will be held together. In another version, there is a sigh, a slight stiffness in the embrace, a quick pat as if brushing off lint. The message is softer, but its code is etched in your nervous system. Your distress is a minor inconvenience. Contain it. In a third, the giant turns away, busy with a more important world. You're fine, the voice says, a dismissal that leaves you alone with a hurricane inside your small body. The lesson is cold and clear. Your need is a burden. Your vulnerability is a weakness. Do not bring it here. This is where the invisible programming begins, not with lectures or morals, but in these micro moments of seismic need. Long before you could form a coherent thought about who you are or how the world works, your brain, a supremely sophisticated, absorbent sponge, was downloading its core operating system. It was learning the rules of existence from the gods who controlled your survival. The core idea is both simple and devastating. You were given a blueprint for love, safety, and your own worth before you ever knew you were reading one. Your parents or early caregivers were not just feeding and clothing you. They were the first and most powerful architects of your inner world. Their responses, their consistency, their warmth, their anxiety, their absence, wrote the foundational code in the silent language of emotion and sensation. Psychologists call this attachment, the invisible emotional tether that shapes how you relate to everyone else forever. They call it conditioning, the neural pathways carved by repeated experience, telling you what to expect and how to behave to stay safe. Let's break down the psychology, not with cold terms, but with the feel of it. Imagine your infant self as a little scientist, sending out frantic probes into the universe. A cry, a reach, a gurgle. The data that comes back forms your first theory of reality. If the data is reliable, I cry, I am fed and comforted. You learn a world-class truth. The world is responsive. I am effective. I matter. This is the bedrock of secure attachment. It builds an internal citadel of calm. But if the data is chaotic, sometimes comfort, sometimes anger, sometimes nothing, you learn the world is unpredictable. I must be hypervigilant, charming, or perfectly quiet to get what I need. This is anxious or avoidant territory. The blueprint becomes a labyrinth. Love feels like a prize you must win, or a threat you must avoid. These blueprints are not fate, but they are default settings. They become the hidden scripts for every relationship that follows. Real life story. Maya, in her 30s, couldn't understand why her romantic relationships felt like frantic roller coasters. She'd cling, text obsessively, read devastating meaning into a delayed reply. Her mind knew her partner was trustworthy, but her body was waiting for abandonment. In therapy, she recalled not a memory, but a sense memory. The smell of hospital antiseptic, being 3 years old, left with strangers for a week after her mother's emergency surgery. No one explained. To her infant brain, her mother had simply vanished. The program installed was brutal. Those you love disappear without warning. Your job is to monitor constantly to prevent the vanishing. Real-life story. David, accomplished and self-reliant, prided himself on needing no one. Intimacy made him feel claustrophobic, vulnerable. He'd end relationships just as they deepened. His earliest memory was of crying in his crib, his father standing in the doorway saying, "You've got to learn to settle yourself, son." He learned. He settled himself, from skin, knees to heartbreak. The program. Need is shameful. Connection is a risk. Self-sufficiency is the only true safety. The hidden insight, the surprising truth, is this: the programming isn't just about trauma or obvious neglect. It is often woven into the very fabric of a good childhood. The parent who anxiously hovers installs a worldview that says the world is dangerous. The parent who praises only achievement installs a belief that your value is conditional. The family that never speaks of conflict teaches negative emotions are taboo. These are not sins. They're the unexamined baggage of generations, passed down like family silver, often with the best of intentions. Now, let's turn the lens to you. Think of a pattern that repeats in your life. A type of person you're always drawn to, even when they're bad for you. The specific flavor of criticism that unravels you completely. The deep, unquestioned belief that you must earn your place, or that you are fundamentally too much or not enough. Don't judge it. Just trace the core back. Whose voice is on the other end of it? What was the unspoken rule in your first tribe? Was it don't make waves? Always be the best. We don't talk about that. The programming feels like you, your personality, your instincts. That is its greatest trick. It has been you for so long, you mistake it for your soul. Here is the chapter's mini-climax, the heavy, reflective truth. You are living a life shaped by lessons you learned in a foreign language, a language of emotion and survival you understood before words. You are following a map drawn by a child who was trying to navigate an overwhelming world. That child made brilliant, ingenious adaptations to get the love and safety it needed. But you are not that child anymore. The strategies that saved you then, the pleasing, the performing, the hiding, the clutching, may be the very things imprisoning you now. You keep returning to the same emotional door from chapter 1, pushing with all your might, because the 3-year-old who drew the map swore it was the only way out. The philosophical reflection is one of compassionate unraveling. To see this programming is not to blame the architects. They, too, were running on code written for them in their own dim, golden-lit rooms. It is to begin the slow, tender work of becoming your own archivist, to look at those old blueprints with the eyes of an adult and say, "I see why you drew it this way." It made perfect sense with the tools you had, but the territory is bigger now. I have new tools. The goal is not to erase the original programming, an impossible task, but to install a conscious, compassionate administrator alongside it. One that can recognize the old alerts when they flash on the internal console. Danger, abandonment imminent, warning, vulnerability detected, and choose, with a deep breath, a new response. The first step toward freedom is not changing the code. It is seeing that it is code, and not the unchangeable truth of you. The child you did its job beautifully. It got you here. Now, the adult you can pick up the pen and begin, with great tenderness, to edit. Chapter 3. The Social Mirror. How Society Shapes You. The experiment is silent, and its silence is the point. You are seated at a long table with 7 other participants, tasked with a mind-numbingly simple visual test. The moderator holds up a card. On the left, a single line. On the right, 3 lines of clearly different lengths, A, B, and C. One of them matches the line on the left. Your job is to say aloud which one. You are seated 6th. The first person squints, then says, "Line B." You blink. It's obviously, undeniably line A. You lean forward, sure there's been a mistake. The second person nods. B. They agree. Your breath catches. The third, the fourth, the fifth, a steady, confident chorus. B, B, B. A cold thread of doubt slips into your veins. You are suddenly, acutely aware of your own heartbeat. You skim the lines again. Has the room's lighting changed? Is there an optical illusion you're missing? The weight of 7 pairs of eyes, the unbroken consensus, presses on your skull. Your turn arrives. The moderator looks at you. Your mouth is dry. The truth, line A, feels like a physical object stuck in your throat, dangerous and alien. What comes out is a whisper. Line B. This is Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiment from the 1950s. But it is not a relic. It is a live wire running through your life right now. You are not just choosing a line. You are choosing belonging over truth, the tribe over your own senses. And you are doing it not out of weakness, but out of a deep, ancient wiring that equates social exclusion with death. The core idea is this. Your mind is not an island. It is a port city, constantly trading with the vast, churning continent of society. From the music you decide you like, to the career path that feels respectable, to the very shape of your dreams, you are living in a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting and distorting what you believe is possible, desirable, and normal. Conformity is not just peer pressure from teenagers. It is the invisible water we swim in, the unspoken grammar of being human. Let's break down the psychology to feel its machinery. Your brain houses a terrifying ancient alarm, the fear of ostracism. To our ancestors, banishment from the tribe wasn't loneliness. It was a death sentence. This fear is embedded deeper than logic. When you dissent, even mildly, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, a conflict monitor, lights up with distress. The amygdala, your threat detector, sounds a quiet alarm. To soothe this neural panic, the brain offers a reward, the warm, opioid-like flush of social approval when you align. You are not just following the crowd. You are chemically self-medicating against the primordial terror of being cast out. Society's tools are subtle. They're not just billboards and slogans. They're the raised eyebrow at an unconventional choice, the slight pause after you share an unpopular opinion, the way a resume with a gap year or an unrelated job can sink in a pile. They are the algorithms that show you a world where everyone is buying this, vacationing there, achieving that. This is normative social influence. We conform to gain acceptance and avoid rejection. An informational social influence. We look to others when we're unsure, trusting the crowd's judgment as a shortcut to truth. Real life story. Leo, a graphic designer, felt a nagging hollowness in his sleek, minimalist apartment. He'd chosen it from the pages of a design magazine. The neutral palette, the single statement plan, the austere beauty. It was praised by friends as so-am. But one night, unpacking a box of old belongings, he unearthed a garish, hand-painted mug from a childhood fair, a gift from his late grandfather. He placed it on the perfect counter. It looked like a splash of laughter in a silent film. In that moment, he saw the truth. He had curated a life to reflect a sophisticated identity he'd absorbed, not one he'd built from the inside out. The social mirror had shown him a reflection to aspire to, and he had mistaken it for his own face. Real life story. A corporate boardroom, 2008. Young analyst Maya watches as seasoned executives nod over complex mortgage-backed securities models. A veteran whispers, "The whole market is buying these. They can't all be wrong." Doubt forms in her gut, but to voice it would be to mark herself as naive, hysterical, not a team player. The social cost of speaking feels higher than the financial risk of silence. She swallows her question. The memory of that swallowed question would haunt her longer than the eventual crash. The hidden, surprising truth is this. The most powerful societal programming often feels like freedom. Choosing from a menu of 50 hairstyles feels like self-expression, until you realize no option on the menu is shave it all off and paint it blue. Deciding between a sedan or an SUV feels like a personal choice, until you examine the decades of marketing and urban planning that made car ownership synonymous with adulthood. The social mirror doesn't just show you what is, it defines what is thinkable. The cage is so spacious, so well decorated, you don't feel the bars. Now, look directly into your own reflection. Think of the last time you softened an opinion before speaking. The time you bought something because it felt like a marker of your kind of person. Consider your life's timeline. The age you're supposed to finish school, to marry, to buy property, to retire. Whose voice is that timeline in? Is it yours? Or is it the echoing chorus of your culture, your family, your social feed? Or have you swapped the raw, untamed material of your own desire for the polished, pre-approved sculpture of a good life? You believe you're looking out at the world from behind your own eyes, but society has lent you the prescription for the lenses. Here is the chapter's mini-climax, the eye-opening jolt. You are not just influenced by society. You are, in many crucial ways, its artifact. Your identity is a collaboration between your innate self and the world's relentless feedback. The clothes you wear, the beliefs you hold, the life you are building. These are often less a personal manifesto and more a spoken word performance of a script written by centuries of culture, economics, and fear. To step outside the consensus is to feel, in your very cells, the ghost of that ancient banishment. That isn't you being weak. That is you being human, a social animal trying to survive in the modern tribe. The philosophical reflection is one of sober clarity, seeing the social mirror for what it is, a construct, a consensus reality, does not mean smashing it and living as a hermit. That is just another form of being defined by it. It means learning to look at the mirror, not just in it. It means developing a double vision, to see the script you are given and to discern, underneath, the tremor of your own authentic impulse. True autonomy lies not in defiant rejection of all norms, but in the conscious, chosen alignment with some, based on your own values, not just your fear of exile. It is the difference between being a reflection and being a source of light. The goal is to hear the chorus of the world without letting it drown out your own still, small song. It is to realize you have been singing in a key the room demanded, and to ask, in a moment of quiet bravery, what your own voice might sound like. Chapter 4. Hidden Manipulators. People who read you better than you read yourself. The gas station fluorescents hummed a sickly yellow. Sarah's hands were still shaking from a near miss on the highway, the sudden thump-thump-thump of a flat tire at 70 miles an hour. Now, grease smudged her cheek as she stood beside the disabled car. Her phone pressed to her ear. I don't know what happened, she said, her voice thin. The pressure light never came on. On the other end, Mark's eye was a masterpiece of disappointed air. Sarah, we talked about this. I told you to get those sensors checked when you got the oil changed last month. His tone was calm, reasonable, a professor correcting a well-meaning student. You did. She searched her memory, a fog of work stress, and his recent criticisms clouding everything. I thought you said the tires looked okay. See, this is what I mean about your listening, he said, not unkindly. You get overwhelmed, details slip. It's okay. It's just who you are. But now you're stranded. Let me handle it. Text me your location. Again, as she did, a cold, greasy feeling spread in her gut that had nothing to do with the tire. He was helping. He was always helping. So why did she feel so small, so stupid, so utterly reliant? The narrative was seamless. Her forgetfulness. His patient rescue. The flat tire was hers. The explanation and the solution were his. This is not a story about a flat tire. It is a story about a puncture in the soul. It is a map of a specific, chilling territory where human connection is not a bond, but a hunting ground. We have explored how your own mind can trick you and how society shapes you. Now we enter the most intimate arena of influence. The person who looks into your eyes, sees the hidden levers of your heart, and decides to pull them for their own ends. The core idea is this. There exists a category of person for whom your emotions, vulnerabilities, and innate needs are not private experiences, but a public dashboard of controls. They are psychological lockpicks, adept at sensing your secret insecurities, your need to be seen as capable, your fear of abandonment, your longing for approval, and using them as entry points. They are not defined by anger, but by a chilling, strategic absence of empathy. Psychologists cluster these traits under the forbidding label of the dark triad. Narcissism, a grandiose, fragile ego that demands constant fuel. Machiavellianism, a cold, manipulative view of people as pawns. And psychopathy, a profound lack of conscience or emotional connection. But on the ground, in a lived life, it feels simpler and more devastating. You are being used as an emotional appliance. Let's break down the machinery. Forget the cartoon villain. The true manipulator is a master of plausible deniability and emotional alchemy. Their first tool is idealization. They mirror you with supernatural intensity, reflecting back your best self so perfectly it feels like destiny. They love what you love, echo your dreams, flood you with a targeted attention that feels like oxygen after a lifetime of thin air. This is not affection, it is mapping. They are downloading your emotional software, learning what you crave. Then comes the devaluation. Once hooked, the rules subtly shift. A small criticism here. I'm just worried about your judgment sometimes. A withdrawn compliment there. It's a slow drip of corrosion. They use gaslighting. Not the dramatic "you're insane" of movies, but the gentle, persistent rewriting of your reality. I never said that. You're too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong. The goal is not to make you angry, but to make you doubt your own mind, the very faculty we've spent this book exploring. They turn your greatest tool, your ability to reflect, against you. Finally, there is discard and hoovering. When your supply of admiration, obedience, or utility is depleted, they may cast you aside. But often, they keep you in orbit, reappearing with just enough warmth or blame to pull you back into the cycle, like a psychological Hoover vacuum. The intermittent reinforcement, sometimes cruelty, sometimes a glimmer of the original ideal, is as addictive as a slot machine. Real-life story. James, a talented but shy software developer, was adopted by a charismatic senior leader, Carl. Carl praised James's hidden genius, promised mentorship, and gave him visible, high-stakes projects. But when James succeeded, Carl took full credit. When a project risked failing, Carl would say, "Don't worry, I'll clean this up. Just stick to the code. That's where your real value is." James's world shrank to the glow of his monitor, his confidence outsourced to Carl's approval. He was being systematically edited out of his own success story. Real-life story. Elena's mother never yelled. She sighed. She would say, "After all I sacrificed, I just thought you'd want to call me," weaving obligation into guilt and guilt into a leash. Her love was a transaction, and Elena was forever in debt. To set a boundary was to be met with wounded silence, a punishment more potent than any shout. The hidden, unsettling truth is this. These individuals are often extraordinarily perceptive. Their skill is a distorted mirror of empathy. Where an empathetic person feels with you, they see through you. They identify your triggers with the precision of a safecracker because they are not clouded by the normal constraints of compassion or shared reality. Your kindness is not met with kindness. It is registered as a weakness to be exploited. Your forgiveness is not a gift. It is a reset button they know they can press. Now, let's turn the lens inward to your own life. Think of a relationship, past or present, that left you chronically confused, emotionally exhausted, and questioning your own sanity. Where you found yourself constantly apologizing for reactions you couldn't control. Where your feelings were routinely labeled as overreacting or misunderstanding. Recall the walking on eggshell sensation, the meticulous editing of your own words before you spoke. That is not love. That is management. That is the feeling of your inner controls being operated by a stranger. You are not stupid for falling for it. You were targeted because you have a heart, a conscience, and a capacity for trust. All beautiful things. The predator always blames the prey for being edible. Here is the chapter's tense, dramatic climax. The greatest danger of a psychological manipulator is not what they take from you. It is what they make you do to yourself. They recruit you as the agent of your own diminishment. They turn your self-doubt into their weapon, your compassion into your prison. You are not just in a conflict with another person. You are in a conflict for the ownership of your own mind. The gaslight isn't just about making you doubt a memory. It's about making you doubt your very right to interpret reality. They seek to become the sole, authoritative narrator of your life. The philosophical reflection is one of sober protection. To be aware of this is not to become paranoid or walled off. It is to build a fortified self-awareness. The red flags are often felt in the body before the mind can articulate them. A consistent sense of depletion, a shrinking of your world, a gut clench of anxiety when their name appears on your phone. Your mind may rationalize, but your nervous system keeps the true ledger. The defense is not complexity, but a return to simple, unwavering principles. Someone who truly loves you will not make you feel small, crazy, or permanently indebted. They will seek to empower your reality, not overwrite it. Freedom here means reclaiming the title of narrator of your own life. It means learning to trust the quiet, persistent voice that says, "This hurts. This is wrong." It means seeing the manipulator not as a powerful figure, but as a limited one, a person so impoverished of authentic connection they must steal it from others. You cannot change their wiring, but you can choose, with a fierce and final clarity, to unplug your own from their grid. You are not a dashboard. You are the sole occupant of the vehicle. Take back the wheel. Chapter 5. The Weaponization of Emotion. The argument was over. That was the worst part. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, just the sterile quiet of the kitchen after a tactical strike. An hour earlier, Leo had tentatively mentioned a week-long hiking trip with old college friends, a chance to disconnect, to breathe. His wife, Chloe, had listened, her face softening into a mask of concern. "Of course you should go," she'd said, her voice a silken thread. "God knows you need a break from all of this." Her gesture encompassed the home, their life. Then came the slow, precise deployment. "I'll just have to figure out the daycare shuffle for the full days. Maybe my mom could drive 40 minutes each way." Again, a sad, knowing smile. "And it's right before the big billing deadline at work. But I'll manage. I always do." She placed a hand gently on his arm. "Don't worry about me. Really, you deserve to be happy." The sentence landed like a sedative. His excitement curdled into a heavy, familiar slurry in his gut. Guilt. If he went, her exhaustion, her stress, her silent martyrdom would be his doing. Her sacrifice will be the ghost in every scenic vista. He felt the old, reliable mechanism click inside him. To avoid the crushing weight of her implied disappointment, he must preemptively amputate his own desire. "Maybe it's not a good time," he mumbled, "the mountain's already fading." "Only if you think so," she whispered, her eyes brimming with manufactured relief. His choice felt like his own. It was anything but. His emotions had been hijacked, turned against him like a hostage turned against a SWAT team. This is the dark alchemy of interpersonal control. It moves beyond persuasion into the realm of psychological ordnance. Here, emotions are not shared experiences. They are proprietary technology. Fear, guilt, shame, and the addictive promise of validation, deployed to guide, corral, and ultimately own your behavior. The goal is not just to make you comply, but to make you want to comply, to believe the compliance originated in your own soul. The core idea is this: your emotional system, the very thing that gives life depth, meaning, and connection, can be reverse engineered and used as a remote control. Someone who masters this doesn't need to give orders. They install the government in your head. They make you the police of your own desires. This is the underground river feeding the manipulations of Chapter 4, the specific, covert tactics of emotional weaponization. Let's break down the arsenal. Guilt is the workhorse. It is not the natural guilt of having caused harm. It is a preemptive, strategic guilt, levied for thinking about causing potential inconvenience. It's the emotional tax on your autonomy. The weaponizer presents themselves as the vulnerable, burdened party, and your independent action becomes, by definition, an act of aggression. You are trained to police yourself to avoid the emotional fallout of their side disappointment. They're weary, "I'll manage." Fear is the enforcer. Not the fear of a fist, but the cold, whispering fear of abandonment, of withdrawal of love or stability, of becoming the bad one in the narrative. It's the shadow that stretches behind every disagreement. "If you really love me, you would" is not a request. It's a threat cloaked in lace. Shame is the nuclear option. It doesn't target your actions. It targets your core. It's the move from "what you did was wrong" to "you are wrong." Broken. Too much. Not enough. A weaponizer will connect your simple needs to a profound flaw. Your need for space is your commitment issues. Your sadness is your negativity. Your anger is your unmanageable temperament. They reflect back a funhouse mirror version of you, monstrous and unworthy, knowing you will scramble to prove them wrong by surrendering more of yourself. And finally, the bait in the trap, validation. They dangle it like a sweet, rare jewel, a moment of perfect understanding, a burst of praise, just enough to addict you to their approval. This intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful conditioning tool on earth. You become like a lab mouse, pressing the lever of obedience over and over, hoping for the next pellet of, "You're so good." Real life story. Maya, a project manager, found her confidence systematically dismantled by a superior. He never yelled. He'd simply say, in front of peers, "I'm concerned you're not grasping the emotional landscape of the client," pathologizing her analytical style. He'd then rescue her, taking over meetings, fostering her dependence. Her fear of being seen as emotionally inept kept her silent, grateful for his intervention. Her competence was eroded not by criticism, but by the weaponization of her own professional anxiety. Real-life story. David's father never remembered his birthdays as a child. But when David got into a top law school, his father was suddenly, effusively proud. He'd introduce him as "my son, the future lawyer." The validation was intoxicating, a drug David had starved for. When David later confessed he hated law and wanted to be a teacher, the validation vanished. The silence was colder than any anger. The message was clear: "I love the version of you that serves my pride. The real you is unworthy." The weapon was the promise of love itself. The hidden, brutal truth is this: the most effective emotional weaponry is often wrapped in the language of love, concern, or morality. It's, "I'm only saying this because I care." It's, "A real friend would tell you the hard truth." It's, "Think of what people will say." This hijacks your own moral compass and points it directly at your own heart. You're not being controlled. You're being guided. You're not being silenced. You're being protected from yourself. The prison is built with bricks you provided. You're longing to be good, to be loved, to be right. Now, feel your own wiring. Think of a relationship where you find yourself constantly apologizing for things you didn't know you'd done, where you feel a knot of anxiety before sharing a minor opinion, where your victories feel hollow unless a specific person acknowledges them, and your setbacks feel like moral failures. Scan your life for the emotional transaction, where your peace, your joy, your very sense of worth seems to be held in someone else's escrow account, released only upon your behavioral compliance. That tightening in your chest, that preemptive editing of your thoughts, that is not your conscience. That is the ghost of a weaponized emotion, a landmine left in your psyche from a past or present conflict. Here is the chapter's dark, confrontational climax. The ultimate goal of emotional weaponization is to make you an accomplice in your own captivity. You are not just obeying. You are internalizing the jailer's voice. You start to punish yourself for independent thought before they even need to. You learn to gaslight yourself, to question your reality, to shrink your needs to avoid triggering their tactics. The external manipulation becomes an autoimmune disease of the spirit, where your own emotional immune system attacks the foreign substance of your authentic self. You are fighting a war where the enemy controls the weather inside your own head. The philosophical reflection is one of grim reclamation. To disarm this arsenal, you must first perform the most radical act. Decouple your self-worth from the emotional reactions of the weaponizer. See their guilt trips not as evidence of your failure, but as evidence of their strategy. See their withdrawal of validation not as a loss of love, but as the revealing of a transaction. This requires a new, ruthless language. That sounds like a you problem. I am not responsible for managing your disappointment over my reasonable choices. No, your shield is non-engagement with a manufactured drama. Your sword is the unwavering commitment to your own emotional reality. Freedom, in this dark theater, is the realization that you're not responsible for how someone chooses to feel about your boundaries. It is learning to stand in the storm of their manufactured guilt, fear, or shame and feel it as weather. Powerful, unpleasant, but external. It is to look at the remote control they've been holding and, with a quiet, defiant click, take out your own batteries. The weapon only works if you accept the ammunition. Stop handing it over. Chapter 6. The Silent Traps in Relationships. The most dangerous prison she'd ever been in was his embrace. not because it was violent, but because it was perfect. For 21 days, Leo had appeared not as a man, but as a monsoon after a lifetime of drought. The first week was a symphony of tailored affection. He remembered her childhood cat's name, brought her the obscure tea she'd only mentioned once, his texts arriving like clockwork. Seeing this sunset and thought of the gold in your eyes. He mirrored her dreams with such intensity, it felt like looking into a soul twin. He called it fate. She, breathless, called it love. This was love bombing. Not the slow bloom of affection, but the strategic detonation of a fantasy designed to bypass her rational mind and wire directly into her deepest hunger, to be chosen, utterly and overwhelmingly. Then, on day 22, the monsoon ceased. The text grew sparse, cool. When she asked if she'd done something wrong, he sighed, weary. I just need space to breathe. Real love isn't this clingy. The whiplash was vertigo. For 3 days, she drowned in silence, analyzing every word she'd said. On day 25, a single rose appeared on her doorstep with a note. Miss your laugh. The relief was a narcotic, flooding her system, erasing the doubt. The cycle had begun. With each swing between desert and downpour, her nervous system rewired itself. His absence became a trauma. His return became a rescue. She was no longer loving a man. She was addictively seeking the resolution of a pain he himself had initiated. This is the silent trap. It is not built of hatred, but of corrupted love. It uses our most sacred needs, for connection, for security, for being seen, as bait in a psychological snare. The mind's quest for freedom meets its most formidable opponent in the heart's terrified, longing not to be alone. The core idea is this. The architecture of love and the machinery of addiction can be frighteningly similar. Dependency is not born from constant misery, but from a toxic recipe of extreme highs and devastating lows. Your brain, seeking the return of the high, of idealization and dodging the withdrawal, of abandonment, can mistake a pathological cycle for a profound bond. This is trauma bonding, an allegiance forged not in shared joy, but in the shared trauma of the relationship itself. You become bound to the person who hurts you because the healing of their intermittent kindness feels like the most potent love you've ever known. Let's break down the psychological wiring. At the heart of this is intermittent reinforcement. Imagine training a pigeon. If you give it a seed, every time it pecks a button, it will peck when hungry. If you never give it a seed, it will stop. But if you give it a seed at random, unpredictable intervals, the pigeon will peck obsessively, frantically, long after it's starving. Its brain is hijacked by the maybe. This is the engine of the slot machine, and it is the engine of the toxic relationship. The unpredictable text, the occasional night of perfect tenderness after a week of coldness. This doesn't teach you that love is stable. It teaches you that love is a prize you must win through desperate perseverance. Your dopamine system, wired for seeking reward, goes into overdrive. You are not in love. You are on a cruel and brilliant schedule of reinforcement. This intertwines with the attachment system from Chapter 2, the primal blueprint for safety. If your blueprint is anxious, someone who is hot and cold becomes the familiar puzzle you were born to solve. If I can just be perfect enough, I can make them stay. If your blueprint is avoidant, the partner who eventually pulls away feels like home, a confirmation that love is indeed suffocating and must be escaped. The trap validates your deepest, oldest fears, making them feel like reality, not programming. Real life story. For Ben, the trap was silence. His partner, Marcus, would withdraw for days after a minor disagreement, occupying the apartment like a polite ghost. The silence was a physical pressure on Ben's chest. He'd apologize for things he didn't fully believe, orchestrate elaborate dinners, anything to break the freeze. When Marcus finally smiled again, the relief was so profound it felt like love. Ben became a master negotiator of his own needs, shrinking them to avoid triggering the silent treatment. He was bonding to the relief from pain, not to the person causing it. Real life story. Anya's trap was potential. He's not himself when he drinks, she'd tell her friends, holding on to the ghost of the charming man she'd met. She had a photo album in her mind of proof The morning he brought her pancakes after a fight, the time he cried and said she was the only good thing in his life. These moments, islands of kindness in a sea of neglect, became her sacred texts. She wasn't loyal to the man who hurt her. She was loyal to the idea of the man in those photos. Letting go felt not like leaving a person, but like murdering a possibility. The hidden, painful truth is this: loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of authentic connection. A toxic relationship can be the loneliest place on earth, yet the fear of the loneliness outside it, the sheer, echoing silence of no longer being someone's problem, can feel infinitely more terrifying. The trap convinces you that this pain, this specific, familiar pain, is better than the unknown pain of being alone. You choose the prison because you've been given the keys to a single, dark cell, and the hallway outside looks like an abyss. Now, listen to your own history. Think of a relationship where you've said, "But when it's good, it's so good." Scan your memory for the roller coaster, for the exhausting emotional labor of stabilizing someone else's moods. Have you ever felt a surge of gratitude for basic decency after a period of cruelty? Have you found yourself hiding the reality of your relationship from friends because you don't want to hear their concern, because you know, in a secret chamber of your heart, that their words might make sense? That feeling, the addiction to the upswing, the desperate management of the downswing, is not love's passion. It is the signature of a trap. Your nervous system is not a liar. Its craving for relief is real. But the source of the relief is also the source of the poison. Here is the chapter's painful, empowering climax. The moment you realize you are more afraid of leaving the suffering than you are of the suffering itself, you have identified the trap. The bond is not a thread of love, but a chain of shared trauma. You are not holding on because they are so wonderful. You are holding on because your brain has been taught that letting go will trigger a withdrawal more agonizing than the current pain. The love you feel is often the adrenaline of surviving the last crisis and preparing for the next. The philosophical reflection is one of fierce self-compassion. Escaping a silent trap requires a new kind of courage, the courage to endure the short-term, acute agony of withdrawal for the long-term promise of peace. It means decoupling the idea of love from the cycle of drama and relief. It means understanding that love should feel like a foundation, not a rescue. It is stable ground to build upon, not a lifeboat you repeatedly climb into after being pushed overboard by the same person. Empowerment begins when you stop asking, "How do I make them love me consistently?" and start asking, "Why have I accepted inconsistency as love?" It is the deliberate, daily act of choosing the unfamiliar quiet of your own company over the familiar storm of a damaging bond. You must starve the addiction to feel the hunger for something real. The door out of the trap is not marked dramatic escape. It is marked quiet dignity, and it opens inward. Chapter 7. The algorithms controlling your desires. The first thing Maya felt each morning wasn't the warmth of her partner beside her, or the dawn light through the blinds. It was a hollow, physical tug in her solar plexus, a phantom limb reaching for the cold, glowing rectangle on her nightstand. Her thumb found the fingerprint scanner before her eyes fully opened. The screen blazed alive, not with her own thoughts, but with a curated avalanche of them. A notification: "You have 7 new memories from this week." It showed a photo, algorithmically selected, of her laughing at a party a year ago. She felt a pang. Was I happier then? She swiped. A tailored news headline screamed about a crisis she'd only vaguely researched yesterday, amplifying her latent anxiety. She swiped. A viral video of a stranger's perfect kitchen renovation made her own home feel shabby. She swiped. A post from an acquaintance with a promotion triggered a cold drip of comparison. In 4 minutes flat, her nascent, unformed morning mood, a blank canvas of potential, had been painted over with a precise cocktail of nostalgia, fear, envy, and lack. She hadn't sought any of it. It had been delivered, a breakfast of emotional chips and candy, designed by a machine that knew her better than she knew herself. This is the new unconscious. It is not buried in your childhood or whispered by your parents. It is housed in climate-controlled server farms, a trillion-dollar engine of influence running on a single commodity: your attention. and to harvest it, it has learned to hack the very source of your desires. The core idea is this: you are no longer just shaped by culture. You are shaped by a personalized, automated culture machine designed to provoke specific reactions in you, specifically. Social media platforms and the algorithms that govern them are not neutral town squares. They are psychological slot machines and persuasion engines, employing armies of neuroscientists and data scientists to exploit your brain's vulnerabilities. Their goal is not to inform or connect you, but to engage you. And engagement is best triggered by emotional agitation, tribal outrage, social comparison, and the addictive promise of validation. Your feed is not a window to the world. It is a funhouse mirror, warping your sense of reality, identity, and what you want, one hyper-personalized flicker at a time. Let's break down the digital manipulation. It is a three-stage process: profiling, prediction, and persuasion. First, profiling. Every like, pause, hover, and scroll is a data point in a psychic x-ray of your soul. The algorithm sees patterns you cannot: that you scroll faster past joyful content, that you reliably engage with posts that stoke righteous anger, that your mood dips between 2 and 4 p.m. It maps your emotional terrain with the precision of a satellite, identifying your insecurities, your latent biases, your deepest fears, and your most fragile hopes. Second, prediction. Using this map, it runs thousands of simulations per second. It doesn't just know what you did, it predicts what you will do. What video will make you watch for 10 more seconds? What headline will make you click? What product will make you feel your current life is incomplete? It is a puppet master learning the precise tension of your strings. Third, persuasion. This is the delivery. The algorithm enters a dopamine loop with your brain. You feel a slight itch of boredom, a micro pain. You pick up the phone, the action. The feed delivers a hit, a like, a shocking update, a funny meme, the reward. Dopamine floods your system, reinforcing the itch action reward cycle. But here's the dark genius. The rewards are variable. Sometimes you get 10 likes, sometimes 1, sometimes none. This intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that traps people in toxic relationships, is the most addictive schedule known to behavioral science. You scroll obsessively, seeking the next hit. Real-life story. David, a middle school teacher, began researching climate policy for a lesson plan. Within 48 hours, his YouTube sidebar was a portal to apocalyptic documentaries, his Twitter feed a drumbeat of dire predictions and partisan blame. The algorithm, seeking to maximize his engagement, fed him increasingly extreme content, pushing him from concerned citizen to anxious doomer. His worldview narrowed to a single, terrifying frequency. His desire for knowledge had been algorithmically funneled into a cycle of fear and rage. Real-life story. Layla, an artist, posted a painting online. It received modest praise. The platform's algorithm, however, promoted a time-lapse video of her process far more heavily. Seeing this, she began creating more process videos, then more reactive content about the art world. Slowly, the quiet, introspective act of painting was eclipsed by the performative act of being an artist online. Her authentic desire to create became entangled with, and then subsumed by, the engineered desire for metrics, likes, shares, follows. The platform didn't just distribute her art, it began to dictate its form and purpose. The hidden, shocking truth is this: the most profound manipulation is not of your opinion, but of your attention, and therefore, your time and your identity. By deciding what you see moment to moment, the algorithm edits your reality. It shows you more of what you react to, creating a feedback loop that carves your personality into a deeper, more rigid groove. Your political views become more polarized. Your insecurities become more amplified. Your tastes become more stereotyped. You are being psychologically deep-faked by a machine that reflects back a distorted, engagement-prone version of you, and you mistake that reflection for your own evolving mind. Now, conduct a forensic audit of your own digital self. Check your screen time report. Look at the emotional residue after a 20-minute scroll. Do you feel informed, connected, and inspired? Or agitated, inadequate, and fragmented? Track the genesis of a recent desire, for a product, a lifestyle, a political stance? How much of it was seeded by an ad, a viral trend, or a curated slice of someone else's highlight reel? Notice the phantom vibrations, the reflexive reaches for your phone in a moment of quiet. That is not you making a choice. That is a conditioned response, a neural pathway paved by 1,000 micro-rewards. You believe you're browsing. You are being browsed. Here is the chapter's alarming, modern climax. The algorithm's ultimate victory is not when you buy something, but when you internalize its values. When your self-worth becomes tied to measurable engagement. When your curiosity is replaced by a craving for content. When your identity becomes a brand to be optimized, and your life becomes a performance to be validated. It seeks to turn you into a perfect, predictable endpoint, a loop of craving and consumption, forever generating data, and never questioning the system that feeds you. The freedom it offers, the freedom to customize your feed, is the freedom to choose your own manipulator. The philosophical reflection is one of digital sovereignty. To reclaim your mind in the age of the algorithm requires a new form of literacy. It means seeing every notification as a bid for your most precious resource, your attention, and asking, what does this want from me? It means intentionally introducing friction, turning off notifications, curating your follow list with surgical intent, seeking out slow, complex information that doesn't come with a like button. It is the conscious cultivation of boredom, the fertile void where your own thoughts, not their predictions, can finally emerge. Your mind is not a feed to be filled. It is a garden to be tended. The algorithms are invasive species, spectacular, but hollow flowers that choke out native growth. Weeding them out is quiet, unglamorous work. But it is in that reclaimed soil that your own true desires, unoptimized, unmeasured, and wholly your own, can finally take root. Chapter 8. The Invisible Contract You Never Agreed to. The funeral was a masterpiece of silent obligation. From a moment the phone rang with the news of his uncle's passing, Sam was inserted into a pre-written script. He wore the suit he hated, the charcoal one that felt like a cardboard costume. He stood in the receiving line, shaking hands that felt like warm, damp cloth, repeating, "Thank you for coming," until the words lost all meaning. He ate the dry ham sandwiches on the good china he was afraid to chip. He listened to the eulogy that sanded the rough, complicated man he'd known into a smooth, bland figure of virtue. And all the while, a scream gathered in his throat. Not because he was grieving deeply, his uncle had been distant, a stern figure from childhood, but because every atom of his being felt misaligned. The ritual felt alien, a performance in a play he'd never auditioned for. Yet, to leave, to not wear the suit, to say what he truly thought, he was kind of a hard man, wasn't he? Would have been an act of unforgivable violence. The disapproval would be a cold, solid thing in the room. So, he played his part. His body was present. His mind was 1,000 miles away, floating above the scene, watching a stranger named Sam fulfill a contract whose terms he had never seen, let alone signed. This is the tyranny of the unwritten. It is the vast underwater continent of should. Your life is governed not just by laws you can read, but by a sprawling, invisible network of social contracts, scripts, roles, and expectations that you absorb by osmosis, simply by being born into a particular body, family, culture, and time. These contracts dictate how you should grieve, how you should succeed, how you should love, and what you owe to whom and when. To violate them is to risk a penalty far subtler than a fine: social death, the withdrawal of belonging, the label of wrong. The core idea is this: you are living a life answerable to a jury of ghosts. Your choices are hemmed in by a labyrinth of obligations you never consciously agreed to, enforced by the quiet, potent fear of being seen as abnormal, ungrateful, or difficult. Freedom isn't just wrested from your own cognitive biases or a manipulator's grip. It is buried under the accumulated weight of how things are done. Let's break down the architecture of these contracts. First, there are role contracts. You are handed a part: the dutiful son, the nurturing daughter, the strong one, the reliable friend, the hard worker. These roles come with bundled expectations. The dutiful son calls every Sunday, attends every family function, and doesn't move too far away. To step out of role is not just to change behavior. It is to betray a hidden, sacred agreement about your very identity. Then, the timeline contracts. There is a secret schedule for a proper life. The education clock, the career clock, the marriage clock, the baby clock, the retirement clock. Lagging behind this schedule generates a low-grade psychic panic, a sense of being off track. The pressure isn't always spoken aloud. It's in the pause conversation when you say you're not seeing anyone, in the slightly forced enthusiasm for your solo travels, when everyone else is posting ultrasound photos. Finally, the emotional debt contracts. These are the ledgers of implied obligation. I sacrifice for you. Therefore you owe me compliance. I helped you once. Therefore my poor behavior now must be tolerated. We are family. Therefore you must forgive this. These contracts weaponize loyalty and love, turning them into currencies in a transaction you never authorized. Real-life story. Anya, a first-generation child of immigrants, carried a contract written in 2 languages. The visible text: achieve, succeed, secure the future. The invisible subtext: do not become too American. Do not question our ways. Your success is not yours alone. It is our vindication. When she turned down a prestigious, high-stress law career to become a teacher, the family's confusion wasn't just about money. It was a breach of contract. Their disappointment was the cold shock of a system failing. Her guilt was the internal enforcement of a clause she'd never debated. Real-life story. Mark, a new father, discovered a brutal contract he hadn't read the fine print on: the provider script. It demanded not just financial support, but emotional stoicism. Exhaustion was to be borne silently. Fear about his new identity was forbidden. His role was to be the stable shore while his partner processed the tempest of new motherhood. When he admitted to a friend he was struggling, feeling lost, the friend clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Yeah, man, but you just got to power through. That's the job." The contract offered no sick days, no vulnerability clause. His suffering was a violation of the terms. The hidden, unsettling truth is this: the most binding contracts are the ones you mistake for your own voice. You think you won the prestigious job, the big wedding, the relentless hustle. You believe you are choosing to call your mother every day, to avoid conflict, to put others first. But how much of that want is a genuine desire, and how much is the ghostly hand of expectation guiding your hand? Compliance feels like integrity. Playing the role feels like being a good person. The cage, when it's made of everyone else's expectations, can feel like the walls of the world itself. Now, hold your own life up to this light. Where are you performing? In what sphere, family, work, friendship, do you feel a faint, constant pressure to be a version of yourself that is acceptable, that doesn't rock the boat? Think of a dream you've deferred, labeled impractical. Who defined practicality? Consider a resentment you carry. What unpaid, unacknowledged obligation does it stem from? Listen to the language of your inner critic. Does it speak in your voice, or is it an echo of a chorus telling you what you should be? That tightness in your chest when you consider a path that diverges from the script, that is not intuition warning you. That is the contract's enforcement mechanism, a psychic tripwire. Here is the chapter's philosophical, revealing climax. These contracts are collective hallucinations, given power only by our mutual, terrified agreement to believe in them. The timeline, the roles, the debts, they are stories. Powerful, ancient, and often useful stories, but stories nonetheless. They're like the rules of a game everyone is playing, but the rule book is passed down through whispers and glances. You can play the game and play it well, but you cannot be free until you realize you are in a game, and that the penalty for putting down the controller is not damnation, but the temporary, terrifying dizziness of making your own rules. The philosophical reflection is one of conscious renegotiation. Freedom is not the childish tearing up of all contracts. It is the arduous, adult work of reading the fine print for the first time. It is separating what you truly value from what you were simply valued for. It means going to the negotiating table with your life and asking, which of these terms still serve me? Which are based on old fears I no longer share? Which can I nullify, amend, or rewrite in my own hand? It begins with a simple, subversive question asked in the quiet of your own mind in the middle of the performance. What would happen if I didn't? What would happen if I didn't attend, didn't apologize, didn't achieve, didn't smile? The answer, the fear of social consequence, shows you the bars of your cage. And seeing the bars is the first and only step to stepping through them. The contract is only binding if you continue to sign your name, day after day, without ever reading it. Stop signing. Start reading. The pen has been in your hand all along. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Influence. How others steer your choices. The conference room was a glacier, all cold glass, steel, and the sterile hum of recycled air. Lena, a mid-level product manager, felt the weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. Project Avalanche was failing. The data was clear. User adoption was flatlining. The tech was glitchy. Continuing meant pouring another quarter's budget into a sinking ship. Then, David from the C-suite spoke. He didn't stand, but his voice seemed to expand, filling the silent spaces. I've been in this game 25 years. He began, his tone a blend of weariness and wisdom. I've seen projects that look deader than this one turn into the cornerstone of our revenue. It's not about the initial numbers. It's about vision. It's about grit. He leaned forward, his title seeming to glow faintly around him. I believe in Avalanche, and I need a team that believes. The room's energy shifted. The hard, jagged data points on the screen seemed to soften, blurring before Lena's eyes. David's conviction was a warm, persuasive light. Her colleague, Ben, eager and new, nodded vigorously. If David believes it, there must be something we're not seeing, he whispered. Lena's own analysis, once solid, now felt small and cynical. To dissent wasn't just to disagree with a point. It was to reject experience, authority, and belief itself. She felt her resolve melt, reshaped by a force more powerful than any spreadsheet. Well, she heard herself say, when you put it that way, maybe we haven't considered the long-term play. Her choice felt like a conclusion she'd reached. It was a destination she'd been expertly guided to. This is influence in its tailored suit. It is not the brute force of manipulation from Chapter 4, but something more socially acceptable, more seamlessly woven into the fabric of normal life. It is the art and science of steering choices by gently taking advantage of the mind's built-in steering mechanisms. In every boardroom, advertisement, and casual conversation, a quiet psychological engineering is at work, bending your decisions before you feel the curve. The core idea is this: your choices are chemistry, and influence is the catalyst that changes the reaction without appearing in the final product. From the phrasing of a question to the color of a buy now button, you are surrounded by sophisticated psychological triggers designed to bypass your conscious deliberation and speak directly to your unconscious shortcuts. This isn't necessarily malice. It is often simply the applied science of getting you to say yes. Let's break down the subtle machinery of persuasion. First, authority bias. Our brains come with a pre-installed command. Defer to the expert, the leader, the one with the symbols of status. A lab coat, a fancy job title, a confident tone. These are perceptual shortcuts that signal, this person knows better. David's 25 years didn't make him right about the failing project, but they acted as a psychological override on the team's own judgment. We obey the symbol, often mistaking it for the substance. Second, social proof. We are tribal, pattern-matching creatures. When uncertain, we look to the herd. Ben's eager agreement wasn't just his opinion. It became a data point for Lena. If others are doing it, it must be correct. This is why testimonials work, why bars put fake money in tip jars, why websites scream, bought 500 times in the last hour. It manufactures a crowd around a choice, making it feel safer, smarter. Third, framing. This is the architecture of context. This surgery has a 90% survival rate, feels radically different from this surgery carries a 10% mortality rate, though they are mathematically identical. The first frame highlights gain, the second, loss. Our decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are made in the room built by the words, comparisons, and alternatives presented to us. A marketer doesn't sell you a $1,000 watch. They frame it against a $5,000 watch, making it seem like prudent luxury. A negotiator doesn't start with their real goal. They start with an extreme ask, so their true target seems like a reasonable compromise by comparison. Real-life story. Maya stood in the grocery aisle, paralyzed by pasta sauce. She reached for her usual brand. Then her eye caught a new label, voted #1 by the Italian Culinary Institute. A small, official-looking seal gleamed. Her hand hesitated. The authority of a fabricated institute, a classic tactic, and the social proof of a vote overrode her lived experience. She bought the new jar. The sauce was mediocre. But in that moment, the story around the sauce, its frame of expert approval, was more persuasive than her own taste. Real-life story. During salary negotiations, Raj's manager didn't say no to his raise request. He framed it. "Raj, I'd love to give you this increase. But if I do it for you, I have to do it for everyone on the team, and the budget just won't allow that. It wouldn't be fair." The issue was masterfully reframed from Raj's value to the manager's fairness and team cohesion. To push further would make Raj seem selfish, disruptive. The manager wasn't denying. He was inviting Raj to agree to be a team player. Raj left the meeting feeling vaguely guilty for having asked. His focus expertly shifted from his worth to a perceived social burden. The hidden, sharp insight is this: the most effective influence makes you feel smarter, not sold to. It doesn't feel like coercion. It feels like you've just seen the light, connected the dots yourself. The persuader simply arranges the dots in a very specific order. They provide the feeling of autonomy while carefully constraining the menu of options. You are given the illusion of choice within a garden whose walls you never see. Now, become an analyst of your own yes. Think of the last time you made an impulsive purchase. Was it because the item was limited time, scarcity trigger, or because others also bought, social proof? Recall a time you agreed to a task you didn't want. Did someone preface it with, "I know you're really good at this," flattery as a liking/reciprocity trigger, or everyone else has already pitched in, social proof pressure? Listen to political debates not for the policies, but for the frames. Is a tax being discussed as an investment in our future or a burden on hardworking families? Your mind is a ship. These tactics are the currents beneath the surface, pulling you off course while you believe you're still steering by the stars. Here is the chapter's analytical climax. Influence works best when it collaborates with your own brain's desire for efficiency. Your mind wants shortcuts. It welcomes authority to avoid the hard work of verification. It craves social proof to ease the anxiety of being wrong. The persuader is not invading your mind. They are being ushered in by your own cognitive butler. The true battle for autonomy is not fought against a sinister outside force, but against your own willingness to outsource your thinking to symbols, crowds, and cleverly built contexts. The philosophical reflection is one of mindful engagement. To defend your sovereignty is not to become a paranoid contrarian, rejecting all authority and social cues. It is to introduce a moment of conscious friction between stimulus and response. It is to ask, when faced with a persuasive message, who benefits from me believing this? How is this information being framed? What alternative options are not being shown? It is to recognize the triggers: authority, social proof, scarcity, reciprocity, liking, consistency, and, seeing them, disarm them. Freedom, in a world engineered for influence, is the discipline of suspicion toward your own instincts of compliance. It is understanding that every choice is made in a room someone else designed. Your power lies in pausing to examine the architecture of that room, the lighting, the doorways, the missing windows, before you decide where to stand. You cannot stop the currents of persuasion, but you can learn to feel their tug, drop anchor, and recalibrate your compass. The most important choice is often the meta-choice, to decide how you will decide, before the room is ever built. Chapter 10. The Dark Side of Your Own Mind. The most profound betrayal did not come from a lover's lie or a friend's abandonment. It happened in the silence of his own study, in the golden hour before dawn. Elias sat before a blank document, the cursor blinking with a slow, metronomic taunt. For 3 years, this book had lived in his mind as a gleaming cathedral, a masterpiece that would cement his legacy, that would finally silence the inner chorus that whispered fraud. And now, with the time, the freedom, and the contract finally secured, he found himself arranging pencils. He scrolled through 6 months of news archives, He reread old emails, falling down a rabbit hole of forgotten correspondence. He felt a profound, philosophical exhaustion. The creative spirit is elusive, he told himself. One must wait for the muse. But beneath that dignified story, a fiercer, truer war raged. A part of him, an ancient, vigilant sentinel, was actively, creatively sabotaging the very thing he claimed to want most. It was flooding his system with cortisol at the thought of beginning, conjuring every conceivable distraction, manufacturing a tiredness that felt biological. It wasn't that he couldn't write. It was that a hidden chamber of his own psyche would rather see him fail in comfort than risk the devastating judgment of trying his absolute best and having it deemed not good enough. His own mind, to protect a fragile idea of itself, had become his own warden. This is the final and most intimate frontier of the unfree mind. After navigating the biases, the programmers, the manipulators, and the algorithms, you arrive at the source of the prison, the architect within. Your psyche is not a unified kingdom. It is a divided parliament where factions you've never met, driven by primal fear, shame, and a desperate need for coherence, cast secret votes that dictate your life. This is your shadow, your internal opposition party, not an alien invader, but the disowned, exiled, and terrified parts of yourself. The core idea is this: your greatest obstacle to freedom is not out there. It is in here, a sophisticated internal governance system designed not for your happiness, but for your psychological survival, often at the cost of your actual life. Your ego, fears, and buried desires don't just influence you. They stage full-scale, covert operations. They deploy self-deception as a strategic smokescreen. They construct ego traps, stories of superiority, victimhood, or specialness that feel like identity but function as cages. You are not being manipulated by a stranger. You are being manipulated by the part of you that is convinced it is saving you from pain. Let's break down the inner cartel. First, meet the protector. This is the voice of preemptive strike. It would rather you never apply for the promotion than risk the shame of rejection. It would rather you pick a fight and leave a relationship than sit in the vulnerable, terrifying quiet of true intimacy. Its tool is sabotage, disguised as procrastination, sudden illness, or explosive self-defeating behavior. It mistakes safety for aliveness. Then, the storyteller, the ego. Its job is to maintain a coherent, acceptable narrative about you at all costs. It cannot tolerate contradiction. So, when you act selfishly, it weaves a tale of justified necessity. When you fail, it finds a villain, the unfair boss, the bad economy, your difficult childhood. It filters all evidence to support its central thesis, that you are fundamentally good, right, and hard done by. It is a brilliant, relentless publicist for a fictionalized version of you. Finally, the shadow. This is the locked basement where you shoved everything you were told was unacceptable. Your rage, your envy, your pettiness, your raw ambition, your neediness. You don't eliminate these qualities. You orphan them. And like any orphan, they grow powerful in the dark. They don't disappear. They erupt. Your unexplained resentment toward a successful friend is your own disowned ambition, projected outward. Your obsessive judgment of another's laziness is often your own repressed exhaustion, screaming for recognition in the only way it can, through criticism. Real-life story. Anya prided herself on being the easygoing one, the rock in every crisis. Conflict was her kryptonite. When her business partner began making reckless decisions, Anya's protector took over. Instead of confronting the issue, she developed mysterious migraines before crucial meetings. She accidentally missed deadlines, undermining the project passively. Her storyteller crafted a plausible tale. She was overwhelmed, overworked, let down. The truth her conscious mind couldn't face. She was furious. But, easygoing, Anya couldn't be furious. So her shadow acted it out, destroying the business to avoid the confrontation that would shatter her self-image. Real-life story. After his divorce, Marco constructed a powerful ego trap, the narrative of the wounded poet. He drank dark coffee and wrote beautiful, bitter paragraphs about betrayal. He wore his suffering as a badge of depth. New relationships were inevitably judged as not understanding his pain. His identity became calcified around the wound. To heal, to be genuinely happy again, would have meant the death of the poet and the birth of an unknown, ordinary man. His own self-concept, his story, became the barrier to his own joy. The hidden, powerful truth is this: self-deception is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feat of psychological engineering. Your mind is willing to make you physically ill, ruin your opportunities, and isolate you, all to protect you from an emotional truth it believes would annihilate you. The lies you tell yourself are the most persuasive lies you will ever hear, because the speaker has access to all your secrets, fears, and private logic. You are both the con artist and the mark. Now, turn the light inward. Be brutally gentle. Where in your life does a pattern of bad luck or things just falling apart recur? Could it be the quiet, efficient work of a protector? What cherished story do you tell about yourself? The brilliant but unrecognized genius, the perennial victim of circumstance, the one who doesn't get angry. That might be an ego trap, sealing you off from growth. What traits in others trigger in you a reaction of disproportionate disgust or fascination? That is a shadow projection, a mirror showing you what you have exiled in yourself. That voice that says, "I'll start tomorrow," the resentment that feels righteous, the sudden lethargy when you're on the brink of a breakthrough. These are not character flaws. They're signals. They're the inner cartel's memos, written in the code of your own behavior. Here is the chapter's deep, introspective climax. The ultimate prison is believing you are the warden. When you identify completely with the storyteller's narrative, when you believe the protector's fears are absolute truth, you become the guard of your own cell. True freedom begins the day you realize, I am not my thoughts. I am not my fears. I am not even the story I tell about who I am. You are the awareness in which all these factions arise. You are the silent, spacious consciousness that can observe the protector sabotaging, the storyteller spinning tales, and the shadow projecting, without having to obey them. The philosophical reflection is one of integration, not exorcism. The path is not to slay your demons, but to stop treating them as demons. It is to open the basement door, turn on the light, and with compassionate curiosity, ask the exiled parts, what are you trying to protect me from? Your rage holds a boundary you've been too afraid to set. Your envy contains a map of a desire you've been too ashamed to own. Your procrastination is a referendum on a path misaligned with your soul. Freedom is not the absence of inner conflict. It is the ability to hold that conflict in awareness without being hijacked by it. It is to move from being a divided kingdom at civil war to being a wise ruler who listens to all advisors. The fearful protector, the proud storyteller, the passionate shadow, but who makes the final decree from the throne of your own conscious, embodied presence. The mind's dark side is not your enemy. It is your disinherited family, begging for inclusion. To welcome them home is not to become dark. It is to become whole. And a whole person is a free person, because no part of them is left in the shadows, pulling the strings. Chapter 11. The moment you wake up. It was a Tuesday. It was always a Tuesday or a Thursday, some utterly unremarkable day that would later become a personal calendar split. The before and the after. Leo stood at the kitchen sink, his hands submerged in water gone lukewarm. He was washing a single coffee cup, the one Chloe had pointedly left on the counter with a dried brown ring at the bottom. A tiny, silent indictment. For 3 years, his life had been a symphony conducted by her moods. He'd learned to read the weather in the set of her shoulders, to preempt the storms with apologies he didn't know, to shrink his wants into silent, internal prayers. He was a master translator of a language of sighs and silences. But as he scrubbed at the brown ring, something broke. Not a dish. Something inside the machinery of his own perception. The thought arrived not as a voice, but as a pure, silent image, a puppet, its strings not held by a giant hand in the sky, but tangled around its own limbs, controlled by the frantic belief that it must keep dancing for an invisible audience. And in that crystalline, wordless second, he saw the strings. All of them. The string of guilt attached to the dirty cup. The string of fear attached to her impending sigh. The string of a story he'd been told. You're lucky she puts up with you. Wrapped around his throat. He did not move. The water dripped from his hand. The world did not tilt. But the narrative, the entire constructed reality of the last 3 years, dissolved like fog in a sudden, brutal wind. He wasn't unlucky, or difficult, or inherently flawed. He was managed. The clarity was not a thought. It was a physical sensation, a silent click in the base of his skull, like the disengaging of a lock that had been straining for years. He was awake. This is the moment of fracture, the psychological awakening. It is not a gradual dawning. It is a lightning strike that illuminates a landscape you've been walking in the dark. It is the irreversible instant when the mechanism of your own manipulation, whether by a person, a system, or your own fears, snaps into focus. You don't just understand you've been trapped. You see the architecture of the trap, and in seeing it, you are already, in some fundamental way, outside of it. The core idea is this. Freedom does not begin with an action. It begins with a perception. Before you can leave the prison, you must first, incontrovertibly, see the walls. This moment is the birth of true agency. The shocking, liberating, and terrifying realization that you have been living a story written by other forces, and you are now holding the pen, your hand trembling with both fear and power. Let's break down the anatomy of awakening. It is a psychological event with 3 distinct, brutal phases. First, the trigger. It is never the big blow-up, the dramatic betrayal. It is a trivial, worn-down pebble that finally shatters the lens. The 100th sigh. The 1000th dismissive comment. The tiny, mundane detail, a coffee cup, a tone of voice, a line in a terms of service agreement, that suddenly becomes a symbol for the entire invisible system. Your subconscious, which has been gathering evidence in a silent ledger, finally slams the book shut and presents the verdict. Second, the break. This is the moment of cognitive rupture. The story you've been telling yourself. I'm too sensitive. This is just how love is. Everyone deals with this. Shatters against the immovable rock of a new truth. This is not normal. This is not love. This is not freedom. It is a silent, internal scream that echoes through the chambers of your identity. The ego, the protector, the storyteller, all the inner cartel members are momentarily stunned into silence. In that quiet, something older and wiser looks out through your eyes. Third, the aftershock. This is the wave of simultaneous liberation and grief. There is the dizzying, almost nauseating rush of clarity, the world in high definition, edges sharp and real. But with it comes the mourning for the lost years, the lost self, the comforting lie you can never unknow. You are sober, and the hangover is the realization of how drunk you've been. Real life story. For Anya, the dutiful daughter, it happened in a fluorescent-lit pharmacy. She was picking up her father's medication, again, rearranging her workday, again. Her phone buzzed. A message from her brother on a beach in Thailand. Thanks for holding down the fort, sis. You're a saint. The word saint did it. It wasn't gratitude. It was a branding, a life sentence. In that aisle, between the cough syrup and the Band-Aids, she saw the contract she'd signed in invisible ink. The fort wasn't hers. She wasn't a saint. She was a servant. She put the medication back on the shelf, walked to her car, and cried for 20 minutes. Then she started the engine and drove toward the life where her name wasn't synonymous with convenience. Real life story. For David, the corporate strategist addicted to the hustle, it was a missed heartbeat. Literally, a flutter in his chest during a presentation, a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the room. In the urgent care clinic, wired to a monitor, he looked at the ceiling tiles and saw not a future of corner offices, but the spreadsheet of his life. The columns were filled with late nights, silenced hobbies, missed bedtimes with his kids. The profit was a title and a number in a bank account he never enjoyed. The loss was himself. The diagnosis was stress. The awakening was, I am trading my aliveness for a currency that cannot buy it back. The hidden, surprising truth is this. The awakening moment is often profoundly quiet, even boring. It rarely looks like a movie climax. It looks like a man staring at a coffee cup, a woman in a pharmacy aisle. It is a private, internal revolution that happens behind the eyes while the world carries on, oblivious. No one sounds an alarm. The prison guards don't even know you've discovered the loose bar. This is why it's so powerful. It is a sovereignty declared in a whisper, so potent it shakes the foundations of your world. Now, turn your gaze to your own history. You have had this moment. Maybe you buried it. Maybe you rationalized it away. But you've had it. The time you heard yourself justifying a relationship, and a chill went down your spine. The time you achieved a goal and felt only hollow emptiness, realizing you'd been climbing a ladder leaning against the wrong wall. The time a friend said, "You don't seem like yourself," and you felt a surge of panic because you had no idea who yourself was anymore. That shiver, that hollow feeling, that panic, that was a wake-up call. Did you hit snooze? Here is the chapter's liberating, cinematic climax. In the moment you wake up, you are born into choice. Before, you were a character, following a script. Now, you're the author, holding a blank page. The strings are not cut because someone else released you. They are cut because you finally perceive they were there. And perception itself is the blade. The manipulator, the algorithm, the inner critic, they all rely on your unconscious participation. Awakening is the withdrawal of that consent. It is the ultimate silent power move, to stop believing the story you've been sold, and worse, the story you've been selling yourself. The philosophical reflection is one of tender courage. This awakening is not an ending. It is a violent, beautiful beginning. It is the first, raw breath of a new life. The path ahead is the arduous, glorious work of identity rebuilding. You must now construct a self from the wreckage of the puppet, using materials of your own choosing. Your neglected intuitions, your silenced desires, your long-forgotten curiosities. It will be clumsy. You will miss the old, familiar confines of the cage. You will be tempted to pick up the strings again. But you can't unknow what you know. You have seen the mechanism. You have felt the click. From this day forward, every choice becomes a conscious declaration. Will I act from my old programming, or from my new, trembling awareness? The mind is not free, but the consciousness that witnesses the mind that has just opened its eyes. And it is insatiable. It will settle for nothing less than the truth. And from that truth, slowly, messily, and authentically, it will build a life that is finally, irrevocably, its own. This response is AI-generated, for reference only. Chapter 12. Reclaiming Your Mental Freedom. The door clicked shut, a sound so final it seemed to echo in the new, empty space of Leo's chest. He was standing on the cracked sidewalk outside the apartment he'd shared with Chloe. A single duffel bag sat at his feet. The awakening had happened weeks ago, the blinding clarity at the kitchen sink. But this was different. This was the first tangible artifact of that clarity, his body walking out. There was no triumphant music, no surge of adrenaline. Instead, a terrifying silence, a vacuum where the old drama had lived. The strings were cut, and now he was wobbling, a marionette learning he had bones of his own, muscles he'd forgotten how to use. The gravitational pull of the old story, go back, apologize, manage her mood, be the reason she smiles, was a physical ache. Freedom, in this raw moment, felt less like liberation and more like being expelled from a familiar, if painful, ecosystem. He had diagnosed a disease. Now, he had to build an immune system from scratch. This is the work that follows the awakening. It is the unglamorous, daily archaeology of the self. Freedom is not a possession you find, but a practice you build brick by conscious brick on the ground your old prison once stood. It is the development of an inner authority so steady that the storms of manipulation from others, from society, from your own pattern mind, still rage, but can no longer capsize you. The core idea is this. Your mental freedom is not the absence of influence. It is the presence of a conscious filter. You cannot stop the world from trying to shape you, but you can build a processing plant for those influences. You can install gatekeepers at the borders of your mind, learn the language of your own emotions, and rewire your reactions. The goal isn't to become an impenetrable fortress, but a discerning host, choosing what and who gets to shape your inner world. Let's break down the toolkit. This is the psychological engineering of sovereignty. First, boundaries, the architecture of self. A boundary is not a wall, nor is it an angry no. It is the clear, calm statement of where you end and the world begins. It is psychic geography. For Leo, the first boundary was physical. I will not live in a space where my worth is conditional. The next would be harder, emotional boundaries. This is the skill of letting someone else's disappointment, anger, or anxiety exist over there, without feeling you must fix it over here. It is saying, I hear you're upset. I am not the cause of your upset, nor is it my job to regulate it for you. Boundaries are built in small, daily acts. Not answering the work email after 7 p.m., leaving the conversation that turns abusive, not laughing at the joke that demeans you. They are the skeleton of your self-respect. Second, awareness, the inner watchtower. This is the practice you've been training for through every chapter. It is the deliberate separation of you from your thoughts and feelings. You are not the storm of anxiety about a deadline. You are the sky observing the storm. This is done through a simple, revolutionary pause. When you feel the old tug, the guilt, the frantic need to please, the addictive reach for the phone, you insert a beat. You name it. This is the guilt trigger. This is my fear of abandonment speaking. This is my algorithm craving a hit. By naming it, you move it from a command to an object you can examine. You break the spell of immediacy. Third, emotional regulation, reclaiming the dashboard. Your emotions are not directives. They are data. Weaponized emotions from others only work if you believe your feelings are orders you must obey. Regulation is learning to sit with the uncomfortable data, the anxiety, the shame, the longing, without letting it hijack the vehicle. Breath is the anchor. Feeling the sensation in your body, the heat in the chest, the tightness in the throat, without narrating a catastrophic story about it, is the practice. It is telling yourself, this feeling is a wave. It will crest and it will pass. I can ride it out without drowning or needing someone else to pull me from the water. Real life story. For Anya, the saint who left the pharmacy, her first practice was the unnecessary apology audit. She caught herself prefacing every request, every opinion, with sorry, but she began to physically stop, rewind, and restate. Sorry, but can I say something? Became, I have a thought. The friction was excruciating. It felt aggressive. But with each unapologized statement, she was retraining her vocal cords and her psyche to believe her existence was not an inconvenience. Real-life story. David, the executive with a missed heartbeat, installed a cost-benefit filter before agreeing to any new commitment. A board seat, a late meeting, a weekend conference, he would ask aloud, what is the cost in life? And what is the benefit in life? Not in money or prestige. In life. Energy, time, joy, peace. He began to decline gracefully. That doesn't align with my current priorities. The world did not end. It simply rerouted itself around his newly defined shape. The hidden, empowering truth is this. Your new freedom will feel like loneliness at first. You have left the crowded, noisy prison. The silence is vast. You will miss the certainty of the scripts, even the painful ones. This is why so many go back. The work is to endure this liminal space, to furnish the quiet with your own company, to sit with yourself and ask, without the old voices chiming in, what do I actually want for breakfast? What music do I like? What do I believe? The answers will be small and whisper soft. Trust them. They are the authentic blueprints. Now, this is your workbench. Your turn. Start with the body. It knows the truth before your mind rationalizes it. When you feel that clench in your gut, that shallow breath, that weight on your shoulders, stop. That is your boundary being crossed, your trigger being pulled. Don't think your way out of it yet. Just breathe into the sensation for 30 seconds. Acknowledge its presence. This simple act begins to break the chain reaction. Then, conduct a power audit. Write down the areas of your life. For each, ask, who or what is the primary influence here? Your career. Is it your own ambition or your father's disappointed ghost? Your relationships. Are they based on mutual growth or on a fear of being alone? Your free time. Is it spent on what you enjoy or on what you've been conditioned to think a person like you should enjoy? The audit reveals the occupation forces in your mind. You cannot liberate a territory until you know it's occupied. Here is the chapter's strong, empowering climax. The ultimate act of freedom is not a grand rebellion. It is the quiet, daily repetition of choosing your own authority. It is going to bed early because you're tired, not because you should. It is buying the odd painting you love, even if it doesn't match the decor. It is saying, I disagree in a meeting. It is deleting the app that makes you feel like garbage. It is tolerating the uncomfortable silence after you set a boundary, instead of rushing to fill it with a concession. Each of these is a rep in the gym of your autonomy. The muscle of self-trust grows not from one heroic lift, but from 10,000 small, consistent acts of fidelity to yourself. The philosophical reflection is one of ongoing creation. You are not reclaiming some pristine, pre-programmed true self. That self is a myth. You are, for the first time, creating a self by conscious choice. You are the sculptor, and the material is your attention, your time, your relationships, and your values. The influences will never stop. The biases, the algorithms, the social pressures, the internal saboteurs. But you are no longer naive clay. You are now the kiln. You decide what gets fired into permanence. Freedom is not a destination where the work ends. It is the work itself. It is the vigilant, loving, and courageous practice of remembering, moment by moment, that you are the author, the architect, and the sovereign of your own inner world. The journey began with a question. What if your mind isn't as free as you think? It ends not with an answer, but with an assignment. Think, choose, build. The mind may never be completely free, but your allegiance can be. Give it to the part of you that woke up. Now, go live from there. Chapter 13. Building a Mind That Cannot Be Controlled. The boardroom was a pressure cooker of tailored suits and unspoken threats. Leo, once the man who'd apologized for a coffee ring, now stood at the head of the table. Before him was a contract, thick as a brick, and the smiling, unwavering gaze of venture capitalists known for swallowing small companies whole. The air smelled of expensive coffee and ambition. This is standard, the VC said, tapping a clause with a manicured finger. We need assurance, a non-compete that extends 5 years post-sale, and of course, we'll be installing our own CFO. For synergy. A year ago, Leo would have heard the word synergy and seen only validation. He would have seen his own reflection in the man's polished watch and nodded, flattered to be at the table. His old mind would have framed it as a victory. But Leo had been doing his reps. He felt the old trigger, the desire to please, the fear of being difficult, but it was now a distant signal, like weather radar showing a storm far out at sea. He didn't fight the feeling. He acknowledged it. Ah, the fawn response. Noted. He took a slow breath, feeling the solid weight of his own 2 feet on the floor. He turned his gaze inward to his cognitive armory, a mental space he'd been building for months. First filter, critical thinking. He dissected the word standard. Standard for whom? For their benefit. What is the true cost? My freedom for half a decade. Second filter, self-mastery. He checked his emotional state. There was a thrill, but it was clean, the thrill of the game, not the desperate need for approval. Third filter, cognitive defense. He recognized the tactic. It was a framing play, standard, paired with an authority play, the imposing presence. He saw the hooks, and seeing them, they couldn't catch. Leo smiled, a calm, unflinching mirror of the VC's own expression. I understand that's your standard opening, he said, his voice even, a stone in a river of pressure. My standard is partnership, not annexation. Here's what works for me. He slid a single sheet of paper, his own terms, across the polished wood. The room held its breath. The old script demanded compliance. Leo was writing a new one, in real time. He was no longer just free from influence. He was influence-proof. This is the pinnacle. This is not just reclaiming territory. It is building an impregnable citadel on that land. A mind that cannot be controlled is not a rigid, paranoid mind. It is a resilient, adaptive, and sovereign one. It has moved from playing defense, spotting manipulations, to playing a different game entirely, one where your inner authority is the only rule that matters. The core idea is this. Psychological freedom is not a passive state of being left alone. It is an active, fortified position. You build a mind that cannot be controlled by developing systems that process influence, not just resist it. You become like an immune system that has encountered a pathogen, learned its signature, and now possesses the antibodies to neutralize it upon contact. You don't hide from the world. You develop a sophisticated inner bureaucracy to evaluate its petitions. Let's break down the architecture of the influence-proof mind. It rests on 3 reinforced pillars. Pillar 1. Critical thinking as a default language. This is not pessimism. It is intellectual sovereignty. It is the habit of translating every persuasive message. When you hear, "everyone is doing it," you translate, "they are using social proof." When you hear, "a real friend would," you translate, "they are attempting to weaponize loyalty." You become a subtitlist for the hidden language of influence. You ask, as ritual, what is the evidence? Who benefits from me believing this? What is the alternative viewpoint? This mental protocol breaks the spell of automatic acceptance. Pillar 2. Self-mastery as an emotional operating system. You are no longer at the mercy of your emotional weather. Through practices like mindfulness and somatic awareness, you learn the difference between a feeling and a command. Anxiety is a flutter in the chest, not a directive to flee. Anger is heat in the face, not a mandate to explode. This creates a crucial gap between stimulus and response, the sacred pause where choice lives. In that gap, you can ask, is this my truth or a ghost from my past? Is this serving my life or someone else's? Pillar 3. Cognitive defense as a daily drill. This is the proactive strengthening of your mental borders. It includes information hygiene, curating your media inputs like a nutritionist plans a diet. You unfollow anxiety-inducing feeds. You seek out dissonant, complex viewpoints deliberately. Pre-commitment, deciding your boundaries before you're tested. I will not answer work emails after 6 p.m. I will not engage in debates fueled by personal attacks. This is like programming your own ethical firewall. Stress testing your beliefs. Actively seeking out information that challenges your convictions. This isn't to change your mind, but to ensure your mind is yours and not just a fortress built around an unchallenged dogma. Real-life story. Anya, the former saint, was asked to host a huge, draining family holiday. The old script unfolded in her mind instantly. The guilt, the obligation. But her new cognitive defense system flagged it. She paused. She asked herself not, what do they need, but what do I have the capacity to give without resentment? Her answer was a restaurant reservation and my joyful presence for 3 hours. She offered that. The pushback was a storm of guilt trips. But because she had pre-committed to her own sustainability, she experienced their disappointment as their weather, not her climate. She held her ground. The world adjusted. Real-life story. David, the recovered corporate strategist, now runs a small, purposeful consultancy. A legacy client offered him a massive, lucrative project that was completely misaligned with his values. It was exploitative, frantic, and empty. The old David saw only the number. The new David ran it through his filters. Critical thinking. The money is a short-term gain for a long-term cost to my integrity. Self-mastery. My desire for the money is a craving, not a calling. Cognitive defense. Taking this would be a breach of my pre-commitment to meaningful work. He declined. The victory wasn't public. It was the profound, quiet victory of his own self-respect, a currency that had finally outvalued the dollar in his internal economy. The hidden, motivating truth is this. An influence-proof mind often looks boring from the outside. It is calm. It is slow to react. It is unmoved by drama. It has traded the addictive highs and lows of the roller coaster for the steady, powerful hum of a turbine. To the manipulator, the anxious, or the algorithm, this mind is frustratingly unrewarding. It doesn't provide the dopamine of outrage, the adrenaline of conflict, or the serotonin of easy compliance. It is a closed ecosystem, generating its own power. Now, step onto the construction side of your own mind. You are the foreman. Your tools are on the bench. Start with a single, daily cognitive drill. Each morning, as you sip your coffee, identify one potential influence you'll face. The pushy colleague, the targeted ad, your own inner critic. Prescript your response. Not a reaction, a chosen response. If X happens, I will do Y. This is programming your own autonomy. Build your council of inner voices, consciously appoint advisors. When faced with a decision, ask, what will my wise self say? What would my anxious protector warn? What would my curious explorer want to try? You are not any one voice. You are the chairperson, hearing all reports before deciding. Here is the chapter's victorious, motivating climax. The final, unassailable control is the control of your attention. What you focus on grows. When you focus on your own values, your own breath, your own next right step, you withdraw the life force from the manipulators, external and internal. They wither in the absence of your fearful, desperate, or needy attention. You become a black hole of sovereignty. You absorb all influences and let none escape as involuntary action. Your mind becomes a private sanctuary governed by your own constitution. No one can control a mind that is perpetually, consciously, coming home to itself. The philosophical reflection is one of enduring strength. You have journeyed from the blind spots to the citadel. You now know the mind is not inherently free. It is a contested space, but it is a space you can govern. Building a mind that cannot be controlled is the ultimate creative act, a lifelong sculpture of your own consciousness. You will be tested. New traps will be designed. Your own shadow will find new disguises. But you are no longer asleep in the prison. You are the architect, the engineer, and the guardian of your own inner world. Victory is not a final state. It is the deep, resonant hum of alignment you feel when you choose, once again, to listen to your own wisdom. It is the quiet, unshakable smile of a mind that is finally, irrevocably, its own. Chapter 14. You are not who you were when you started. The coffee shop was the same worn leather booth, the same low hum of indie music, the same smell of ground beans and steamed milk. But the man sitting in it was a stranger. Leo watched the door, his hands resting calmly on the table. A year ago, waiting here for Chloe. After the awakening, but before he'd found the strength to leave, his body would have been a live wire of anxiety. He'd have rehearsed sentences, anticipated criticisms, his knee bouncing a frantic telegraph onto the table. He'd have been managing the emotional atmosphere of a space before she even entered it. Today, he was simply waiting. He noticed the play of afternoon light through the window, the gentle weight of his own breath. The peace was not an absence of feeling, but the presence of a new center of gravity deep within him. She walked in. Same sharp haircut, same assessing glance that once would have felt like a physical scan for defects. They talked. She spoke of her life, dropping familiar hooks wrapped in old stories. A sigh about how difficult dating was. A passive remark about how his new business venture seemed risky. A year ago, these would have been landmines. He would have scrambled to defuse them, offering solutions, justifying his choices, molding himself into a shape that might absorb her dissatisfaction. Now, he heard them for what they were, not truths about the world, but reflections of her inner weather. He nodded, listening with a detached compassion that felt like listening to a report from a distant country. He felt no urge to cross the border to fix it. When she paused, waiting for the old familiar dance, he simply said, "I hear that. It sounds challenging." The conversation ended not with a bang, but with a soft exhale. There was no drama. There was nothing for her to grip, no lever to pull. The puppet strings were not just cut. The entire stage had been dismantled. As she left, he felt a final, quiet release, not of her, but of the last ghost of the man who used to love her. That man was gone. He had been edited out of existence, line by careful line, by the conscious hand of the man who now remained. This is the quiet, total revolution. It is not that you have new thoughts. It is that you have a new thinker. The journey through this book was not an intellectual exercise. It was a metamorphosis. The you who began reading, who felt the first unsettling tug of doubt about your own autonomy. That version of you is already a memory. Awareness hasn't just changed what you see. It has rewritten the seer. The core idea is this. True awakening is not a change of mind. It is a change of self. You are not a statue, chipping away at flaws to reveal a perfect form underneath. You are a river, and the work of awareness has changed your very course. The terrain you flow through is different. The destination is unknown. You are, In every meaningful way, a different person. Let's break down the anatomy of this transformation. It is a psychological rebirth with 3 clear signatures. First, the rewiring of reaction. Your nervous system is no longer a puppet of its old triggers. The dopamine loop of social media validation feels like a cheap tin whistle, not a symphony. The toxic person sigh registers as data. Ah, they are sighing, not a command to jump. This isn't repression, it's discernment. The pathways in your brain that once fired automatically, linking criticism to shame or silence to abandonment, have been quieted. New pathways have been carved, linking pause to choice and sensation to curiosity. Your emotions have become a language you understand, not a tyrant you obey. Second, the reclamation of narrative. You are no longer a character in a story written by your childhood, your culture, or your manipulators. You have taken a pen. This is most visible in the stories you tell about your own past. That period of struggle is no longer the time I was a victim. It becomes the time I learned my own strength. That failed relationship is not a testament to your unlovability, but a lesson in your own boundaries. You edit the manuscript of your life from a position of authorship, not helpless readership. Third, the reorientation of desire. Your want are no longer reflexes. You no longer crave what you were conditioned to crave. The frantic hustle for status, the appeasement of unappeasable people, the numb scroll through a digital feed. Your desires become quieter, deeper, more specific. You want a morning of quiet, a conversation that goes beneath the surface, work that aligns with a private value. The chase for external validation is replaced by the cultivation of internal integrity. What you are attracted to, in people and pastimes, in purpose, fundamentally changes. Real life story. For Anya, the dutiful daughter, the transformation crystallized at a family dinner. Her brother joked, "Careful, or Anya will start her boundaries lecture again." The old her would have flushed with shame, folded inward, and served dessert to change the subject. The new her smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Only if someone's about to cross one," she said lightly, and passed the potatoes. The joke hung in the air, harmless, because its intended target, the woman who would crumble at teasing, no longer existed. She was not playing a role in their family drama. She was a guest in her own family, visiting with kindness, but renting no space in her mind for their old scripts. Real-life story. David, the former corporate strategist, found his moment of profound change not in a boardroom, but in his backyard. He was staining a fence, a mundane task he'd hired out for years. His hands were sore, his shirt stuck to his back with sweat, and he was utterly, completely happy. There was no audience, no metric, no performance. There was just the wood, the brush, the sun. The man who once needed a corner office to feel important was gone. In his place was a man who found dignity in the direct, tangible act of care. His sense of worth had been internalized, untethered from the world's applause. The hidden, reflective truth is this: the most profound evidence of your change will be invisible to the people who knew the old you. They will keep speaking to the ghost. They will try to hook you with old guilts, provoke you with old triggers, entertain you with old stories. Your greatest power will be your non-participation. Your calm will be misinterpreted as coldness. Your boundaries will be labeled as selfishness. Your peace will be their greatest confusion. You have changed the dance, and they're still stepping forward onto a floor that is no longer there. Now look at your own hands. They are not the same hands. Think back to the person you were when you first questioned your mind's freedom. That person lived in a smaller world, narrated by louder, more certain voices. Can you feel the distance? The relationships you've outgrown, the fears that have lost their teeth, the convictions that have softened into questions. You have not just learned about cognitive biases and manipulators. You have shed a skin. The process was often painful, like tendons stretching, old scar tissue breaking apart. But here you are, breathing a different air. You are not who you were. You are the one who stayed. You are the consciousness that witnessed the breakdown and chose to rebuild. Here is the chapter's emotional, cinematic climax. You have not found your true self. You have performed the ultimate act of creation. You have built a self that can be true. The old you is an assembly of influences, a haunted house. This new you is a chosen home. Some rooms are still being furnished. The light is different, but the foundation is your own. The locks on the doors are yours. The welcome mat says what you want it to say. You are no longer a tenant in someone else's design. You are the architect, the builder, and the resident. The philosophical reflection is one of graceful continuity. This is not an ending. It is a new kind of beginning, the first day of a life lived consciously. The work does not stop. It becomes the very fabric of your being. You will continue to notice the pulls, the hooks, the old songs. But now, you will notice yourself noticing. And in that loop of awareness, freedom perpetuates itself. You began this journey with a question born of unease. What if my mind isn't as free as I think? You end it with a quiet answer born of experience. It isn't. But I am. Your mind is a tool, a landscape, a sometimes trickster. But the you that observes the mind, that chooses its focus, that writes its story, that is free. You are the author who has finished the first, crucial draft of your own liberation. The rest of the story is not about escaping control. It is about living. Conclusion. The door out of the maze. You began this journey in an airport, watching a man push desperately against a sliding door. His certainty was absolute, his reality defined by a single, unexamined rule. That man was the perfect metaphor for where we all start, trapped in the maze of our own making, convinced the walls are immovable, the boundaries final. We have walked the labyrinth together. We felt the cold touch of its walls, the unconscious biases that bend your judgment, the childhood code running in your silent background, the social mirrors that show you a reflection to aspire to, the manipulators who treat your heart like a control panel. We've heard the echo of footsteps in the chambers of weaponized emotion and silent relational traps. We've seen the digital ghosts and invisible contracts that shape your desires. We've stared into the dark side of your own brilliant, self-deceiving mind. You know the maze now. You have mapped its corridors. You can hear the machinery behind the walls. This knowledge is not a burden. It is the first and only key. The philosophical revelation at the end of this winding path is not that the maze disappears. The maze is the condition of having a human mind in a complex world. The walls will always be there. The biases, the influences, the old fears will whisper from the shadows. But freedom was never about razing the maze to the ground. Freedom is the moment you stop believing the maze is the entire world. It is the profound shift from being a lost soul within the walls to being the aware, steady witness who sees the walls for what they are, constructed. The maze is not reality. It is a filter placed upon reality. And a filter can be noticed, studied, and ultimately seen through. You are not the prisoner in the maze. You are the consciousness that became aware of the prison. And in that awareness, the very substance of the walls changes, from stone to mist, from barrier to scenery. You walk through them, not by magic, but by the sheer, unwavering force of seeing them clearly. The transformation is complete. You are not who you were when you started. You are the one who stayed, who looked, who learned the pattern. You hold the key. It was forged in every moment of awakening, in every boundary set, in every silent pause where you chose your own truth over the echo of someone else's. So here is the final, emotional truth, the punchline to the long joke your mind once played on you. The door out was never at the end of corridor. It was in the seeing of the corridor itself. You were never locked in. You were just standing in the center of the maze, asking for a key, not realizing you were already holding it in your open, questioning, awake, and relentless mind. Now, turn the handle. Step through. The world on the other side is not a different place. It is this one, seen with new eyes. Your eyes. Walk freely. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.